President al Assad Geneva conference should produce clear results with regard to fight against terrorism in Syria. President al Assad says it is possible for Geneva to contribute to the process of dialogue between Syrians. And Syrian Arab Army units achieve progress on several axes and eliminate dozens of terrorists. Good afternoon. This is news in English from Syrian Arab television in Damascus. President Bashar al Assad met with the official delegation that is going to participate on behalf of Syria in Geneva II conference. The president gave his instructions to preserve Syria's sovereignty and refuse any foreign interventions in Syria's internal affairs. The president asserted that any political solution requires first and foremost stopping terrorism and exerting pressures on the countries supporting it. In an interview with the French press agency AFP, President al-Assad asserted that any political outcome of the Geneva II conference that doesn't include fighting terrorism would be of no value.
The President said that the most basic element, which was repeatedly referred to, is that Geneva Conference should produce clear results with regard to the fight against terrorism in Syria. In particular, it needs to put pressure on countries that are supporting terrorism by sending terrorists money and weapons to terrorist organizations, especially Saudi Arabia and Turkey. And of course, the Western countries that provide political cover for these terrorist organizations. The President added that this is the most important decision that Geneva II could produce, emphasizing that any political solution that's reached without fighting terrorism has no value. There can be no political action when there is terrorism everywhere, not only in Syria, but in neighboring countries as well.
And in the same interview, President al-Assad announced that in case there was a public desire for the Syrian people and by the Syrian people, he would not hesitate to run for a second time for presidency.
The President said that his running for the presidency depends on two things. It depends on personal aspirations or a personal decision on the one hand and on a public opinion in Syria on the other. As far as he was concerned, the President saw no reason why he shouldn't stand. As for the Syrian public opinion, the President explained that there was still around 4 months before the election date to be announced. If in that time there was public desire and a public opinion in favor of his candidacy, he would not hesitate for a second to run for the election.
The President also said in his interview with Agence France Presse that we are fighting a battle to defend Syria, and there is no choice but to win this battle.
The President said that in any battle there is always the possibility of winning and losing, but when you are defending your country, it's obvious that the only choice is to win. Should Syria lose this battle, that would mean the spread of chaos throughout the Middle East. This battle is not confined to Syria and is not, as Western propaganda portrays, a popular uprising against a regime supporting its people and a revolution calling for democracy and freedom. These lies have now become clear to people. A popular revolution doesn't last for 3 years, only to fail. Moreover, a national revolution cannot have a foreign agenda. The President added that as for the scenarios that he has considered, of course, these types of battles will have numerous scenarios, but they are all focused on defending the country, not on running away from it. Fleeing is not an option in these circumstances. The president asserted that he must be at the forefront of those defending the country, and this has been the case from day one.
During their visit of solidarity with the Syrian people, members of the Russian delegation, including members of the parliament as well as religious and social figures, led by Sergei Garvilov, head of the Royal Affairs Committee in the Duma Council, underlined that Syria is facing terrorism and is not only defending its interests and the interests of the region as a whole, but also defending peace and security in the whole world. The Russian delegation met with President Bashar al Assad, who considered Russia's stances towards Syria and the region as very important, being based on international principles and laws, and being in the interest of all people, especially the Russian and the Syrian peoples, asserting that the Syrian people are facing terrorism and foreign interference, adding that the pressures exercised on Syria is similar to the pressures which has been exercised for long years on Russia and China, because the West has a long history of colonialism and the Western countries have a problem with any independent country. President Assad also asserted the necessity of having a firm stance in face of the takfiris and terrorist movements, emphasizing the need to have an international alliance to fight terrorism and also to have an Islamic alliance to strike the Wahhabi takfiri movement. Members of the delegation thanked President Assad and the Syrian people for their consolidation with the Russian people after the terrorist attacks in the city of Volgograd last month, considering those who stand behind terrorism as the same, whether in Syria or Russia. Within the same context, Minister of Information Omran Zabi met the Russian delegation, asserting the importance of their visit to convey the truth of what's happening in Syria, especially when there is a war on the Syrian media carrying out repeated attacks on its workers and institutions, blocking the transmission of Syrian channels on the satellites of Hotbird, Arabsat and Nilesat with the aim of preventing its voice from reaching the world. As Zabi pointed out, the cooperation with the Russian friends to transmit the Syrian television channels via the Russian satellites. Units of the Syrian armed forces have inflicted heavy losses on terrorists, some of whom are non-Syrians, killing or injuring them and confiscating their weapons in Sednaya town in Damascus countryside. A military source said that the army units have confronted a terrorist gang that tried to attack a Cherubim monastery in Sednaya town, killing and injuring most of the attackers and confiscating their weapons, some of which are Israeli-made rockets. Other units of the armed forces inflicted heavy losses on the terrorists on the vicinity of Al-Jumruk al-Qadim area in Dar al-Balad and destroyed their criminal tools. The source added that our units eliminated terrorists in Al-Qasr area in Al-Lajat in Dar'a eastern countryside. Among the identified killed is Muwaj al-Salim. Moving to Idlib countryside, where units of the armed forces killed scores of armed terrorist groups in Shallakh and Benin village, in Jabal al-Zawiya and the farms surrounding Hayle village. Among the identified killed, there are two Saudis, Muhammad Abdul Hadi and Fuad al-Masabani. The Interior Minister of France, Manuel Valls, asserted that 12 French underage are on their way to Syria in order to join terrorists there, indicating that the French intelligence is closely watching 700 French terrorists who are about to be in Syria in any time, showing that the open Syrian-Turkish borders have facilitated smuggling French terrorists, whereas the British Daily Telegraph have revealed that Al-Qaeda is now training hundreds of terrorists from Europe in Syria, then encouraging them to come back home for making terrorist squads to attack in their countries. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said that Iran was an important country to solve the crisis in Syria as it affects stability in the whole region. Lavrov added that the so-called coalition of opposition powers was formed by external funders and that it put forward different conditions from the outset to take part in Geneva II conference. The 27th International Conference on Islamic Unity has concluded its activities in Iranian capital Tehran with consensus amongst the participating countries on the necessity to combat strife and sedition and to stand as one in the face of the takfiri campaigns and attempts to distort the image of Islam, underlying the utmost importance of combating takfiri thought. The final communique of the conference asserted that the Islamic nation is one and that political disputes should not be a catalyst for conflicts among the different Islamic schools of thought. It also called for condemning the collective or individual terrorist acts as any strife would be in the best interest of the enemies of Islam. Moreover, the communique voiced support of the participating countries to Palestine and Lebanon by stating that resistance is a legitimate right for people. It also vehemently denounced any attack against Palestinian people and their sanctuaries and the attempts made by the Israeli enemy to Judaize Jerusalem. It's noteworthy that the three-day conference has unanimously elected Syria's Grand Mufti Dr. Ahmed Badruddin Hassoun to be the President of the General Assembly of World Association for the Rapprochement of Islamic Schools of Thought. With this, we come to the end of our news for today. Thank you for watching. For more details about Syria and the region and to view this bulletin again, you can always visit our website in English, www.syriaonline.sy. Now to the latest business and market news with Vani Konashian, but after a short break.